Hi, welcome to the Overland Legend. I'm Alan. The Defender 90 is my favorite Land Rover of all. I just love the proportions and you just can't beat the capability. I'm so glad to have a 90 again. And if I think about the adventures that I had in my previous 90s, I can only imagine what sort of adventures we're going to have in this one. The very first Defender that I had was a Tdi 90, a white one. And then the second one that I had was my one and only brand new Land Rover that I got, which was a yellow Tdi 90. And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you the adventures that I had in those awesome vehicles. The Defender 90 Tdi was my dream car that I bought with 60,000 kilometers on the clock from a Land Rover dealership friend of ours, Clive Crossman. I was only too happy to trade in my Opel Kadett and make this D90 my only vehicle. Initially the D90 had an easy life because I still had my 109 camper Lemon, so all the overland trips were done in Lemon. The D90 got to go on the fun trips like this one to Tiffindell ski resort in the Eastern Cape.
The walk, but I just can't seem to talk the talk.
The drive up to Tiffindell from roads can be quite tricky, especially if the weather changes. So my Defender was the designated taxi to ferry our friends up from the car parking area.
Hey. Jeez, I think I'm losing the plot here.
On this particular trip, my heart sank as we were climbing up the pass, and I hear a terrible screeching sound from the front of the vehicle. It didn't sound good. After stopping and inspecting it, it turned out to be just a stone stuck between the disc brake and the backing plate.
Classic.
Tiffindell was such a novelty, being the only commercial ski resort in South Africa. It sits at almost 3,000 meters or 9,000 feet above sea level on the south-facing slope of Ben Macdui. It was a tiny with only one small slope, but it was massive amounts of fun, snowboarding and learning to ski, and we always had an amazing time. Sadly, it's closed at the moment. Eventually I decided to rather kit out the D90 for overland trips and sell Lemon my camper. The D90 was just so much more comfortable to drive, and Candice and I could fit into it easily for overlanding. One of the first trips we did was to Ponta de Ouro in Mozambique in 2003 with a bunch of friends. Back then it was still a challenge to get there through the thick sandy tracks. Looking at this footage now, it's amazing to believe that this is Ponta de Ouro, with these desolate beaches and none of the developments on the hillside. We camped in the campsite right on the beach. I had converted my Defender 90 into a mini Lemon. With the inspiration from the Lemon camper build, the difference was that everything was removable, so I could keep the vehicle as standard and turn it into a camper quickly. I made a floor box for storage that also served as a seat. I had space for the fridge, and I also made a kitchen unit to carry all the essential cooking items. The awning provided shade, and the roof tent was the bedroom. This camping setup worked really well. and on this trip we had a great time, with some kite surfing and diving. And then, in a yellow flash, I suddenly had a brand new yellow Defender 90 Tdi standing in my garage. I had convinced myself that this new Tdi was so much better than the Tdi, and I had to get one. I fitted a water tank to it on the left hand side and transferred all my camping setup from the Tdi. The first trip we went on was an amazing trip to Namibia with a friend of ours, Luke, and his family. We drove across through Botswana on the Trans-Kalahari Highway, through Windhoek and up to Swakopmund. It was my first time in this area, and it was fascinating to see the German architecture and culture of Swakopmund. We spent a couple of days in this area, mainly to kitesurf in Walvis Bay. This coastline is well known for some fantastic wind, and we weren't disappointed. Then we travelled south down towards Sossusvlei and camped at Sesriem. It was mid-December, so the heat was something else. The next morning we were up early to visit Sossusvlei sand dunes. The plan was to take in the sights and then board down the dunes. Luke had taken with some specially made hardboard for a bit of sand dune surfing. The full video from this is one of my most watched videos on my old YouTube channel. Click on the link above to see the full video. The next part of the trip was crazy, heading into Lüderitz. The road driving in was ominous, like driving in a sandstorm. Our plan to camp in the exposed campsite was not going to be possible in 43 knots of wind. We didn't stick around and headed out after spending just one night. After that trip, I had to replace my windscreen because it got so sandblasted. We passed by the Fish River Canyon, which is the largest canyon in Africa, at 160 kilometers long, 27 kilometers wide, and over half a kilometer deep. At the southern end of the canyon, we stopped off at Ai and enjoyed the hot springs. We then crossed back into South Africa at Vioolsdrift and meandered down the beautiful west coast, visiting the scenic coastal towns and stopping off a few times on our way down to Langebaan. Langebaan is one of my favorite places because of the beauty and the solid, reliable wind that blows there. And that meant some world-class kiteboarding. And that again was a whole lot of fun. This was an unforgettable trip, not because it was done in such a cool D90 or because we visited so many beautiful places. In fact, it had nothing to do with the places we visited. It was special because on Christmas Day we spent the night at a beautiful spot overlooking Clanwilliam Dam, and I snuck an engagement ring that I had been carrying the whole trip into a pile of presents. And Candice and I got engaged on that trip. And then of course we got married and had to go on honeymoon. And yes, we drove there in the yellow Defender 90. We travelled to Bilene in Mozambique and there was no camping. Instead, we stayed at the Mahalan Resort for a memorable and exclusive honeymoon, as we were virtually the only guests at the whole resort. Yeah, sadly, soon after that, I sold that Td5, that lovely yellow Td5 90, and I needed a bigger vehicle, and so I got my 110. But the adventures, you know, that we had, that I had in all those vehicles, just bring a huge smile to my face, and it's really nice to relive them. But hopefully, in this vehicle, we're going to have just as many adventures again. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. And you can look forward to more videos about building and overlanding in Land Rovers. And until next time, I'll see you. Bye.